It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Welcome to Learning Now Television, the June edition. Nigel, who have we got on this month?
We got some, as usual, Kate, we've got some fabulous people and some interesting interviews and ideas being shared. First of all, Robin Hoyle, not his normal role. This time I was interviewing Robin and talking about his 20 years with World of Learning, including chairing it for the last 10. So he was reminiscing on how it's evolved and indeed how L&D has evolved with it. Now, of course, with 2 shows a year, one in Birmingham, one in London. So Robin's really happy with the way World of Learning is going, and he shared a little bit of that enthusiasm with us. And then I talked to Lisa Minogue-White, Lisa, who used to be sitting where you're sitting, Kate, and she's talking about the way Pluralsight is evolving its platform, including, we talked about a guru model where they have networks of their users all around the world, and the company respond to their needs in real time. So they've got experts joining the group and they evolve the necessary learning as they go. It's a really clever and interesting model, focusing this time on cloud computing because that's so big for them. So it's called The Cloud Guru, and it's been very, very successful and a potential model, not just for the whole of Pluralsight, but for other providers. And then Martin is talking about the state of the global workplace 2022. 2023. Let me not slip a year. 2023. And that's the Gallup report. But what they're doing for the first time is not talking about people who are engaged, but people who are thriving. They're not talking about people who are partially disengaged, but silently leaving. I'm not talking about people who are fully engaged. They are fully disengaged. They are actively leaving. So it's a different kind of frame, but still some very depressing figures in the light of post-COVID. And then we've got Stella Collins progressing on with a 6-part series on neuroscience, and Bob Mosher with part 4 of his series on virtual instruction. So it's a really interesting and varied session this week.
As always, enjoy the show.
Enjoy the show. It is always a pleasure to welcome back Martin Cousins with yet another seminal research report. What have you got for us this month, Martin? What have you chosen?
Well, this month we've got the State of the Global Workplace 2023 report from Gallup. Now, viewers will be familiar with this report because this report is an annual fixture and it surveys well over 100,000 employees across 150 plus countries. And they've been doing this for a number of years. I think in the fine print in the reports, I think they've said that their data now extends to well over 2 million employees. So it's long running, and it just gives a snapshot really of how people are finding work. So I think it's a useful report, and it segments geographically. So you can have a good look at, if you're a UK based organisation, you can have a look at Europe, or if you've got employees around the world, then you can benchmark, what's happening for them in their location versus what's happening for, a kind of sample study really that's in this group. So it's a good report.
And the good news is that for the very first time since 2009, we've got the highest level of engagement at 23%. It's up 2% from 2021. So it started off, the first report in 2009, employee engagement was measured at 12%, and it's doubled pretty much to 23%. That's still not what I would consider to be world class, but nevertheless, there's this upward trend that went up in 2019, dropped in 20 and 21, and has rebounded in 2022. Yeah, is that right, Martin?
So, I mean, the kind of trend line, if you like, is up, but you have to ask the question, is 23% of employees being engaged, or as they call it, thriving, which I thought was quite interesting language. If you say someone is engaged, would you think that means they're thriving? I'm not quite. Thriving seems like a lot more powerful kind of word to use. But anyway, so 23% over the last 14 years. Yeah, the trend is up, but really that also means that 59% are not engaged, and that is the term quiet.
They're quiet quitting.
Yeah, so
quiet quitting.
It's 2023. Who needs the term engaged? Why not? Let's use quiet quitting instead.
Yes, it's gone.
If we know what that means for the.
And then the 18%.
Well, they're loud quitting, according to the report. They're the ones that are actively disengaged.
Quitting, exactly. So thriving, quiet quitting, or loud quitting. That's the new nomenclature for Gallup. You're absolutely right. No more engagement. It's about whether you're quietly quitting or you're thriving. There's a big leap between quietly quitting and thriving, isn't there? It's a huge leap.
And I think that so the rump of employees, 70% aren't engaged. So although the trend around engagement is going up, it's painfully slow in terms of improving, and there is a massive kind of stubborn, persistent rump of people who aren't engaged or as engaged as employers would like. Now, if you think that's bad, it's quick, and I don't mean to sound like the Grim Reaper here, then have a look at Europe, because in Europe, 13% are engaged, 72% are quiet quitting, and 15% are loud quitting. So 87% are disengaged. I mean, that is against the kind of average across this kind of set of data. It's quite incredible, really. That's very, very low level of engagement. So I think there's cause for concern here, I think. And whether you call it...
It's lower than the Caribbean and Latin America, which is surprising.
Now, what this...
Is it the lowest?
It is the lowest.
Is Europe lower than anywhere else?
Yeah. Now, I think what's worth saying is I think it's always good to be able to discuss research and then look at the causes or for why this is happening. Now, this report is not... It doesn't really go there. It's like a snapshot. So it's 100 pages long, and it's got all these segments, these geographic segments. So it provides a lot of data for each geography. But what it doesn't do is then do a deep analysis of what might be driving that. Okay, but what it does do, it says like stress is still a big issue. Lots of over 50% of employees think now is a good time to find a job, and a similar amount are currently watching for or actively seeking a new job. So there's a disengagement story, there's a looking for new work story in this, and I think also we're kind of. The kind of answers it does provide are worth looking at. I think if you work in learning or HR, then I think there is a bit of practical advice in this, and it asks what would you change about your workplace to make it better. Now, the answers fall into three categories: engagement or culture, pay and benefits, and well-being. Now, engagement or cultural factors, they represent 41% of responses. Now, here's a few examples, right? And I think viewers will be fairly recognise these. For example, everyone to get recognised for their contribution. I would like it if managers were more approachable and we could talk openly. They should grant more autonomy in the work to stimulate everyone's creativity. I would like to learn more things, but the work I do is quite repetitive. I wish I was respected more, given a fair chance in getting promoted, clearer goals and stronger guidance. Now, there may be a massive rump of disengaged people, but that list, just in the culture and engagement section, if you like, of the factors that could change, they're all, we know those. They're all doable in terms of being fixable. So I don't think, the answer here is beyond any HR team. I think most organisations would know this. Pay and benefits again. I mean, really, that's just people wanting to be paid fairly and in terms of merit and the work that they do. They also want some rewards that might help them with childcare and things like that, for example. There's nothing controversial or nothing that organisations wouldn't already be aware of. So I think that there's still a big challenge. This report does really present quite a big challenge around engagement.
Well, here's the rub. Here's the rub, Martin. All of this information with clear indicators of what you have to do to fix it. It's been going since 2009, and yet no one is taking the initiative and trying to fix it. So what you're saying is that this is very useful for HR and learning and development professionals, but only if they take some drastic action to try and deal with the challenges that the report portrays. And they don't seem to be. Why do you think that is?
Well, in the exec summary of this report, and there is a caveat with this, the main point, the top line message is change the way your people are managed. Now, in some ways, you could say Gallup would say that because they offer management development and leadership development programs. But actually, we know that managers and management and leadership is just as persistent a problem as disengagement is. There is, organisations find this really, really difficult, and a lot of what drives, I think, this feedback about work is to do with the way people are managed, because that is direct.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, that is what they do. They do management development, and they're saying we can guarantee to move your staff from, I think they say, from 8% to 18% higher engagement if you follow our management methodologies. So yes, so there's a little bit of self-interest in here, but I think that it also rings true, doesn't it, that poor management is a huge part of disengagement.
Look,
huge part.
What I'd come back to, Nigel, is just look at that list of what would you change about your workplace to make it better. This is not my thinking. I'm just speaking for the employee that has answered the question, who says, I want to be recognised for my contribution. Yeah. I want my manager to be more approachable and open. I want more autonomy in my work. I would like to learn more. I just want some respect. I want to be given a fair chance in promotion. They are all related to your relationship with your manager. And that is a massive issue. So I think I take your point. That's what Gallup does. But actually, that's what those employees are saying. So if you listen to your employees, you'll probably find that engagement problems are linked in some way to the way they and the team are managed.
Yes. It's almost a classic definition of demotivation, that if you did the opposite, if you gave people more autonomy, treated them with respect, give them clearer goals and the skills to deliver, build more of a community than focus on individuals, you create motivated teams, and motivated teams are engaged or tend to be more engaged. So it's a very simple message, dressed in a very complicated report. It goes on and on and on, as you say, and it itemizes every single region of the world. But nevertheless, it boils down to some pretty simple stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment.
Okay, Martin, Why would anyone not read this? It's absolutely crucial piece of data, isn't it? In the panoply, it should be there for every HR and learning and development manager, and it should set an agenda, a very clear agenda running in organizations. Martin, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nigel.
Upskill and inform your learners with Mind Tools for Business. Empower your people to thrive at work and help them step up and meet everyday workplace challenges with confidence. Our toolkit provides unlimited access to thousands of quality assured resources, all in one place. It's easy to use and on demand, anytime, anywhere. Experience stress-free onboarding with dedicated client partner support. And get access to our library of industry insight and expert analysis. Perform, manage, lead with Mind Tools for Business. Visit mindtoolsbusiness.com to find out more.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be speaking to Lisa Minogue-White. Again, it's been a number of years, not months, a number of years since I had the chance to talk to Lisa, but I wanted to catch her and just talk about some of the new things that are happening in Pluralsight, which I think are worth sharing. And I also think that Pluralsight is making some decisions that every other provider of learning could perhaps sit back and imitate, or at least learn from. Pluralsight focuses on technology learning. That's always been at its heart, and it's still the biggest and best known in the world. But it does more than that, and we're going to talk a little bit about the learning environment that it's trying to build. Lisa, welcome. Let me stop talking.
Oh, feels like I'm at home. It's lovely to speak to you, Nigel. Like I say, it's been far too long. I can't believe it's been that long. But yeah, it's wonderful to speak to everybody, and hello to all the Learning Now TV fans out there. And yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation because I think we're going to touch on some bigger issues that are bigger than Pluralsight actually, but kind of reflect, I think,
Yes.
what work feels like today.
Yes, I think so. And I want to kick off by asking you about A Cloud Guru. This is something that was launched relatively recently by Pluralsight, but to me, it's like an integrated learning environment globally. That you've got support groups that can be anywhere. You've got stuff being created almost on the hoof, depending on the needs of the group, and a relationship built wherever you happen to be in the world. You're not limited to one geography or even one organization. If you want to, you can open it up widely. Is that true? Is that fair enough?
Right at the heart, the start of it, if you almost go back to the origin story of Pluralsight, one of the things that Aaron Sconard, our CEO, has always spoken about is democratizing tech skills, because that insight and intelligence can be anywhere in the world. So the fact that we acquired a cloud guru, like you said, really kind of speaks to the whole kind of DNA of what Pluralsight has been about. Because the genesis of starting with, it was actually Aaron on a plane a couple of decades ago, flying around the world doing Microsoft training, realizing that actually there's a huge demand here and a huge amount of latent talent all over the world. We ought to put this online. That was the start, the embryonic sort of start of what Pluralsight is today. But all the way through that journey, it's been not so much about content or catalog or these are the skills and the things that you need. It's much more about how do technologists work, what's happening in their world at the moment, how do they excel or do the things they need to do. And that goes beyond a course. It's about, you and I, our background, Nigel, in knowledge management, it's about the tacit knowledge as well. But what does it mean in context? How do we get to people at the point that they need it, that they can assimilate it, they can apply it, look at what it feels like for them, and then keep that kind of virtuous circle going. So every kind of step that Pluralsight has made in its maturity has been about being in the workflow. And we talk about that a lot. I mean, that's been a topic that's been there forever, but it's often been kind of misinterpreted as giving a bite-sized something here or bite-sized something there. It's much more fundamental about the day in a life. And our product officers love this. We've got a great slide on kind of the day of a life of an engineer and what that looks like for them. And then what it looks like over a month and over 6 months and over a year, the sorts of things that they're doing and that are adapting and changing. Sometimes you need to fundamentally lift up your skills onto a brand new architecture, and you need longer courses. Sometimes I'm in a piece of code, I need something there and then. Sometimes I'm completely reskilling for a new role and I need those networks. I need that mentoring. I may need some VILT at that point or academies to get me where I need to be. So we're trying to look at the whole life cycle of a technologist and what they need at any one time. And of course, cloud is just a fundamental. Cloud used to be, oh, it's the next big thing. It isn't. It is. Everybody needs it. It touches everybody's role. So cloud, the acquisition of a cloud guru was really because we knew how much deeper and how much quicker the cloud landscape was working, and we need to set that pace and keep that pace. And you're going to see more from Pluralsight on other key domains around security and data in a very similar vein to what we've done with cloud. But you're right, it's about really understanding how these things work in an organization and mapping the experiences to that.
And also, the thing that really interested me is that it is about putting people together when necessary, letting people support themselves and learn from each other, not assume that one computer screen or one course from Pluralsight does everything. It can't do everything. And that flexibility by having bits of new content being developed on the hoof as the needs emerge. So it's very workflow based, as far as I can see, workflow based and work based on the needs in the workflow, so that wherever you go, whatever the direction, you're there to support them through that journey, which is, as you say, changing fast and accelerating. It's not getting any slower. And you need to be able to adapt. This is kind of profound. This is a long way from give them a course. This is about have a friend by your side who will get you through whatever the skills change, environment changes occur in your organization. And let's find like-minded people who can also help you or on the journey or maybe a little bit further ahead of the journey. This is big, don't you think? This is a big change.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think it's a big change in terms of the place that we hold in the market, which makes us quite unique, which means it's actually really great being able to have a conversation about this, because it kind of does take that kind of conversation and thinking about how your organization works, because it's even beyond the human support that you get by having study groups and people working together for a particular aim. It's also the technology that you need to do that, because remember, skills don't happen in a vacuum. We can help people acquire the skills that they need in GCP or AWS or Azure. But in the end, what about the environment they're going to work in? Yes. I can give you a course on how to be a certified AWS cloud practitioner for sure. And there are other courses out there. But then what you need, what's really important to organizations, is that how do I refactor the things that I have? How do I actually get it on that environment? I need a safe space to be able to practice that, because that costs organizations a huge amount of money. It also costs psychologically in terms of your confidence, in terms of letting yourself loose on live environments. So we make a huge investment, and not just in cloud, like I say, you'll see in data and security as well, on live environments. And also not just, here's a lab, live environments where you may have a guided experience, because that's the point you are in the workflow. I'm not quite confident yet, Nigel. I need a real sort of guided, I need to do this. So here are the prompts, through to custom sandboxes where you can actually recreate and do what get as close as you possibly can to the actual live environment that you're working in. And that's always been the holy grail in learning, is that how do we reduce that delta between I did that skill acquisition experience, now I've got to do the darn job. Yes. How do I close that gap? That's the other big piece on that from a cloud guru that we have really assimilated into the Pluralsight experience, is as many varied labs as possible that get you as close to that moment where I'm absolutely confident live I can do it. Yes. And then, of course, the other kind of half of our business is then understanding the actual workflow. So going into your repositories and actually looking at then how are people coding? What does that process look like? Is the organization creating a conducive environment that enables people to code effectively and efficiently? And does that process need to improve? We're trying to be both data-driven, but also very human-centered driven. And what does it feel like to be a technologist? That's what's always been at our heart and always will be, that everything that we build is around that.
Yes, and you've complexified as the roles have changed and got more complex as well. So, I used to talk about know, do, be, and I think you're right there. Knowledge is not enough. Being able to do something in theory is not enough. It's about being, it's about total absorption and practice so that you end up operating in a different way instinctively without having to refer to anything. So you've gone from knowing something through to changing the whole process of work, and you've stuck. I think you're saying you stick with them through that process, and you get to understand more and more and more about the workplace and more and more about the workflow, so you can be more and more useful to the organization as well as to the individuals. So it's a partnership almost, isn't it? It's not a transaction. Give me money, I'll give you a course. It's a partnership going on in theory forever, as long as the organization exists.
100%. And, you raised a really good point there. We have some phenomenal, I'm very fortunate to lead a team of phenomenal account managers who also partner with strategic success managers. And the customers that benefit most from solutions like this are willing to ask themselves some questions and look at these things differently. Because I'm going to say something a little bit controversial now. It is really easy when you're deciding what solutions to put in place that you look at pure health metrics, which in my mind are lead indicators. Yes, you've made an investment, and yes, of course, you want people using it. Of course you do. People got to be in there and using it. But going through the old metrics of, time on site and number of courses, etc., is so high level in terms of the fundamentals of actually learning isn't about how many courses I've done in a year. It's how much have I been able to save myself in time by automating something that was a manual process previously? Or how much money have we spent by being able to reduce the time we thought it would be to take this thing on-prem to off-prem by 2 weeks? There's plenty of ROI you can do on that. That's the fundamentals. How many great people are we keeping that maybe their skills were becoming redundant, but we were able to completely reskill them? They're fundamental finance questions that your board and shareholders, or if you're a company for the public, that us as taxpayers ought to be asking is actually what's the real impact of this stuff? And for me, when I used to be in L&D, that was the most interesting work. Providing catalogues is pretty boring, to be honest, and actually just looking at usage statistics doesn't really tell you anything. I want people spending the most efficient amount of time they can in learning to move them through that workflow to applying that skill as quickly as possible. Shouldn't be just trying to keep hold of them in this learning space because I want them there for plenty of time. That doesn't do anybody any good. We need to see the individual for where they are, they are starting from, because everybody's different, benchmark where they are, give them the experience they need, get them doing stuff, because everybody benefits. I feel more productive. I feel like I'm doing great stuff, and the business see it in their results.
And that goes so much further than just technology. That's a philosophy and approach to learning, and I'm 100% with you. It's a great place to leave it. So, because let's leave it on a high. Take note of that. This is complex stuff, but the benefits are huge, absolutely huge, in being able to increase productivity and move an organization forward. So Lisa Minogue, Regional Director of Strategic Accounts for UK and France. You could manage my strategic account anytime you want. So it's a pleasure. Great to talk to you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Nigel.
Bye.
In the L&D world, we all know our biggest challenge is knowledge fade and demonstrating ROI from our training interventions. At Elephants Don't Forget, we use artificial intelligence to guarantee that what you train your employees, they learn and retain. If you are looking to transform the impact your training content has in your business, improve the ROI, and perhaps help employees learn and retain even the dull regulatory material, drop me a line at nelly@elephantsdon'tforget.com.
This is the 4th episode of Bob Mosher's virtual instruction series. And this time he's talking about virtual instruction in the workflow. Not virtual instruction in the workflow. This is a really interesting and compelling episode.
Greetings, friends, and welcome back. I do hope this video finds you well. My name is Bob Mosher, and as I've been introduced in the past videos, I am the co-founder of an organization called Apply Synergies. And we are the pioneers of a framework called the 5 Moments of Need, and we help organizations understand how to design workflow learning solutions. Why is all that so critical here, and why does that maybe qualify me to be talking to you about this? Because as we've been saying before, virtual instruction has emerged as an incredibly powerful way to drive performance. It frees instruction from the brick and mortar that I have behind me of bringing folks on premise and having to cover everything. That's a remarkably freeing design approach, friends. And in the last session, I talked about something called GEAR, G-E-A-N-R. Gather, expand, apply, and receive feedback. And as we talked about, 3 of those 4 letters happen in the workflow. We empower learners through the gather session so that when they get back to the workflow, they can take learning in chunks, they can apply and receive feedback, they can fail and pull themselves out of that and remediate, and then they can come back to yet another virtual instruction to move on and continue their learning. So in this session, I want to talk a bit more about the importance of that workflow section, how you understand it better, and some critical pieces you need there, as well as things that will happen in the gather or virtual instruction. The first thing starts with understanding the workflow itself, friends. It's called workflow analysis. We need to understand what happens in the workflow if we're going to support it. We have to be able to sit down with our SMEs and those that perform the work and ask questions where you understand 3 powerful things. What are the tasks they perform that make up the workflow? When those tasks are orchestrated together, what is the processes that emerge that ultimately patch together to make a workflow itself? And then last, what are the supporting knowledge? What are the things people need to know to perform those tasks? Tasks, processes, and supporting knowledge. Those 3 things, friends, when understood, help us understand and show what the workflow is. Why is this so important? Because that, friends, becomes instruction. That's what the virtual sessions are about. We map to the workflow and help people understand the work performed when they go back. And because of what we talked about before and models like GEAR, you're able to chunk those gather sessions so that you help people return to the workflow and perform optimally there. Now, next principle. To do that well, they need something called a digital coach. We live in a digital world right now. We make digital tools all the time with our LMS, e-learning, LXP, right? Well, there's something called a digital coach or electronic performance support that's been around in our industry since 1991, when a wonderful lady like Gloria Geary instituted this whole thing in our industry. A digital coach supports the workflow. It is literally a platform that sits side by side with the learner in the workflow and helps guide them through the tasks, the processes, and the supporting knowledge to get things done. It becomes the crux and the tie that binds across your virtual sessions. And more importantly, it's the tie that binds learners to the workflow when they get back and have to perform. So we build a digital coach so that people can have that when they work. How's this all come back to virtual instruction? Well, now we do something called ramp up, ramp down when we're in the sessions itself. We talked about the gather sessions. We now have this digital coach, friends, and it is a teach the fish model, not a feed them one anymore. The goal, frankly, is not so much that they leave having learned everything or that they know everything. To put it simply, what we want them to leave with is knowing where to find everything. It's an art of being able to support oneself in the workflow. So yes, we teach to the workflow, we teach to critical skills, things that are most important to be taught, but more importantly, we surround that with instruction on the digital coach, how to troubleshoot, how to remediate, how to find information, so when learners return to the workflow, they are able to work more powerfully there. So the virtual session does become the crux of where that learning occurs, but again, it's an enablement model, friends, now, not a knowledge sharing one. It's not one that relies on the instructors being wonderful every time. They become more of a guide and a sage to help people understand the tools and the strategies to go back and find information in the digital coach or with resources that surround them so that they can perform better in the workflow. Virtual becomes the center of that, and it really allows us to break up learning as we talked about before so that we can teach to and about the workflow. We can teach to and about the tools that they need when they're in the workflow to perform, and that's the optimal way to drive performance when they get there. Thanks, friends. We hope this fourth session has been helpful. We'll wrap it all up together when we see you in the fifth session and kind of put a bow around the whole thing. Bob Mosier again. Hope all is well. Looking forward to our next session, friends. Be well.
Maybe we'll do that later. Hey, so you can see this is just like using a whiteboard in a classroom. And then you do my 3-year-old's favourite, you just have a nice little wiggle. 1, 2, 3, rate it now.
A really quick question, you might want to answer this later.
You see, I love this.
Next up, we've got Stella Collins, renowned expert on learning and the brain, with the second in her new series. And this month, she's talking to her colleague Tina Harris, and they're discussing how you motivate your minds and body to learn. So fascinating stuff.
Hello, and welcome back to the Neuroscience of Learning. I'm Stella Collins, and this time I have with me my colleague Tina Harris, and we're going to be looking at how you motivate minds and bodies to learn. If we want people to transfer knowledge into the workplace, we need them to feel motivated. And we tend to learn what matters to us, the things we run away from, the things we run towards, the things we love, the things we want to eat. We learn what's important to us. But as we're learning and as we're thinking about our motivation, our brain states aren't static. We're having a huge range of different states in our brains as we go through a learning process. And most of those states are under the control of neurotransmitters. They're very complex. There are possibly hundreds of them. Scientists haven't discovered them all yet. But we're just going to focus on a few that are really important for learning. So the first one I'm going to mention is curiosity. And curiosity is the candle in the wick of learning. It kickstarts learning. And curiosity is fueled by that ever-present dopamine. Dopamine is incredibly important for reward, for attention, actually for physical movement, and you've probably also heard that it's connected to addiction. So dopamine is hugely important to us in terms of learning. Another really important neurotransmitter for memory is acetylcholine, because it helps us to pay attention. And attention is the key to memory. Sometimes in learning, we get a bit stuck. We need to sort of persist. We need to try harder. But when we have got stuck and then we do persist, we get a real feeling of satisfaction. And that's serotonin you're feeling then. It's a really nice, feel-good, warm neurotransmitter. Makes us feel pleased with ourselves. And one of the things that's really, really important for learning, and I know, Tina, you're very interested in this, is making sure that we help reduce stress, because stress is very bad for learning. It might help us learn to run away from a fierce tiger, but it doesn't help us learn the sort of things we need to learn at work. And the hormones that, or the neurotransmitters that are particularly important there are cortisol and adrenaline. Both are needed to help us escape from the scary stuff, but they also reduce the ability of our brain to learn. So Tina, we've had a little bit about the neurotransmitters. How do you promote motivation as people are going on their journey? They need to automate skills, their habits, they need to transfer their skills into work. What do you do?
So actually, there's a lot of things you can do to influence people's states. And you've spoken about motivation, but you've also spoken about curiosity, all of which are linked, highly interlinked. So there's lots of different things we do. My top things, I think, certainly for motivation, is about why. So we often jump straight into what and without actually linking into the why. So I make sure I spend time in my learner's shoes before I even start my design, thinking about what's their why. And then in the design, I make sure that we have the why in the design itself, and we give learners the opportunity to reflect on that and link to their own situations and really see the benefit of what they're doing and how it will help them in the longer term. So that's really important. Other things we do, you said before about stress, and that was interesting. Setting the tone of the learning is really important right from the start. So we want challenge is fine, but we need challenge in a safe environment. So things like, giving people opportunity to guess things beforehand shows that it's okay to get it wrong. Doing things like asking them what they already know. So just inviting contribution. So guessing and asking what you know is really good for the brain to stimulate the right places. So definitely both of those tactics can help to create the right state. And yeah, curiosity, so use novelty, do something a little bit different. Don't give all the answers straight away, but get people thinking and wondering why you've done something, but always give them an answer. It doesn't have to be immediate, but fairly soon after they need to have an answer.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tina. So we're going to sign off now, and we'll see you soon for more ideas about neuroscience in learning. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Anyone who's ever watched Learning Now television will know the person I'm going to talk to now, Robin Hoyle. Robin has been the most regular contributor over the years, apart from me, that is. Fair dues. So Robin has talked about every aspect of learning. He's spoken to a host of people, famous and not so famous, around the learning space. But we're going to talk about something very different today. Robin, what I'm going to concentrate on is your chairmanship of the conference, the World of Learning Conference, which is held in Birmingham every year. So, Robin, this year, 2003, is your what number conference? Do you remember?
Well, I reckon if you don't include just the ones that I've been chair at, but the ones that I've spoken at before as well, I think I may well have done more than 20 of them. So I think I've done quite a few. But I've been chairing now for, I think it's around 10 years. There was a little gap with the pandemic, of course, and all those things where things didn't happen. But yeah, it's about 10 years since I first started to chair the World of Learning Conference. And this year, as you may have known, we returned to London for the first time in a long time. So we've also now planned another conference in London for 2024, which will be essentially another 2-day conference. So we've got the 2-day conference in London, early part of the year, and then in October, back to the glories of the National Exhibition Centre in Birmingham, where we'll be looking forward to meet a whole host of interesting folk for a couple of days then.
Excellent, thank you. There are only 3 people in the world with that kind of longevity. One is Donald Taylor and the Learning Technologies Conference. The second is Elliot Maisy and the Learning Conference. And the third is Robin Hoyle and the World of Learning. So you are in an elite triumvirate, I have to say, with longevity. Robin, just take us back 20 years or 10 years when you've been chairing it. What has changed? What would you say are the shifting themes over the time that you've been listening to so much of the contributions? You're not only chairing it, you're buzzing around trying to keep track of everything that's going on in the conference as well.
I mean, I think obviously that there have been some technological shifts within the world of learning and development, and that's, as one would expect, that's had an impact. We've moved from, a focus around things called learning management systems towards things that are much more interesting and responsive to people's requirements and organizations' requirements than simply, track and trace type e-learning stuff. So I think the focus has shifted. Interestingly, though, it's also shifted away from technology. I think when I was first involved in the World of Learning conference, and even when I first took over as chair, I think a lot of the focus of the conference components, the speakers who were there, were talking about changes in technology. They were talking about digital learning. They were talking about video. And although that's still part of the package, it's not now the whole of the package. I think there's been a significant shift towards talking about why are we doing this? What is the strategic focus of learning and development's role within an organization? How do we actually affect significant change within people's working lives? What's the performance angles? And you see that in this year's program as well. So we've got focus around AI, obviously, because it's the big ticket item, but we've also got focus around things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've got much more about the people side of things, and hallelujah, we've got quite a lot of focus around how we're measuring impact and whether or not we ought to be doing some of the things that we're doing at all. And that's refreshing for me. And I know you and I have had conversations in the past where we keep going, yes, but what difference does it make? What do I do differently on Tuesday as a result of this intervention that somebody has spent thousands of dollars on? And the answer is, for many organizations, a bit of a head scratch, and I don't know. So I think that's been a big shift. For sure, we've still got, some of the big platforms are there, and they're talking about what it is that they do, but they're getting smarter and they're getting less focused around what I call a kind of marketing metrics, which is how many eyeballs have been on something, and more about a performance metric, which says what have people been able to do that they couldn't do before they went through whatever the learning intervention was. And that learning intervention, quite obviously, has shifted from being a course or an e-learning module or a collection of e-learning modules, and towards something which is much more dynamic, much more focused around individual learning at the point of need. And that's been really refreshing and really interesting to see that transition over time.
Yes, I think that's right. And the topics you've chosen wouldn't have been around 3 years ago, really. So that it is shifting. And I guess in some ways, the big conferences just put their finger on what is changing. And that's their job in a way, to highlight what's new, what's exciting, what is challenging, and bring the world up to date. So who's speaking, Robin? You're chairing. Who are the key people at the conference this year?
We've got some really good. I'm very excited that Chara Balasubramaniam, whose name I'm going to have to get better at pronouncing between now and October, is joining us. He's the Chief Learning and Development Director at Diageo, and he's talking about the things that I've just mentioned. Results focused, organizationally driven, outcome focused learning. So this idea of how does an organization as large and as diverse as Diageo ensure that the learning interventions really make a difference where it matters for the individuals in individual teams or individual breweries or distilleries or marketing functions or sales organizations. How do they make things better and more efficient and effective in those environments? And we've got a fascinating keynote, I think, on the day two, which is Philippa Hardman from Cambridge University, and she's created an AI-powered learning design tool called DOMS. And she's going to be talking us through how that works. And I think that's going to be really, really interesting to understand a practical application of AI, because I think many people are still kind of going, yeah, I kind of know it's coming. I've heard of this thing called ChatGPT. I have no idea what that means, apart from apparently people are going to be able to cheat with their homework. I don't think that there is clarity yet about what that means in earnest, even though I know, quite a lot of people know, we've been using AI in learning and development for 20 years now. But it's not been particularly sophisticated, and people have not understood what that means. So I think that's an interesting idea that we've got.
It is,
and we've got some for the first time we're using more panel discussions and conversations, including for one of the keynotes, which again we tried out in London. It works really, really well. We've got Laura Overton on there. We've got Suk Pabiel on there. We've got Pash Reddy from KPMG on there. Denny Sadhu. It's a collection of people who are really doing interesting stuff. And I think just to hark back a little bit to what you were saying about the job of conferences being to bring what is new and exciting and interesting to the market and tell people about it and help them to experience it and understand what it might be and how it might work for them. I think all of that is true, but where some conferences I think have gone wrong is they've been talking about the things that are going to happen in 6 months' time. What I think World of Learning has always done is it's always talked about things which are leading edge, but not bleeding edge. We've talked about the things which have been tried and proven and delivered results, rather than just, this is stuff you could do, isn't it exciting? Look at these shiny buttons. And the shiny button thing never really floated my boat very much, I have to say. I want to know what it does for me, what problems it solves, what opportunities it creates, what new directions I can go in by using, whether that's an approach to learning, whether that's about using a technology, whether that's about using some tried and tested methods that people have used somewhere else. I want to know that it's worked so that I can then pick those options and learn alongside the people who've used it. Much more interesting than somebody trying to sell me something which has got lots of buttons on, which they will. Last year,
I completely agree.
Netflix of learning, and this year they're describing as the TikTok of learning. God help us all, frankly.
What you're describing, that's another sort of transition, isn't it? From here are the buttons and they all do wonderful things to here is a workplace problem and this is the way we've tried to build a solution and this is the impact that it had on the workplace. So that trajectory is, I think, can't be underestimated in its importance. Just people focusing on the real stuff. You agree?
Absolutely. And here's a workforce problem, and we have sought to solve it with the people who are experiencing the problem. Which is the crucial thing. It's not to say that the people who are experiencing the problem automatically or instantly know how to solve it. Otherwise, they didn't need us in the first place. So, that seems to me to be a self-evident fact that we are there to bring some support, some focus and some clarity. But we're also there to bring experiences from elsewhere and to share that with people and say, how about this? How about that? But we're not trying to force them down this is how it always worked. Because in many cases, we're in a space now where we don't know if it's going to work in the future. Things have shifted very significantly, and we need to help people navigate those changes.
Completely agree. And I guess it's a truth universally known, isn't it, that if you put stuff in context, if you explore the real world, it's always more exciting than whiz-bang stuff that has no context and often no real-world implementation. So, Robin, tell us when it is, and then I'll thank you for your interview, and we'll move forward.
So this year, the NEC event is the 10th and 11th of October, 2023, a two-day event. Lots of activities going on. We've got sessions for platinum delegates as well. So there's a kind of smaller group who will go through a series of additional activities, working in smaller groups with some of the speakers on the main platforms. And yeah, it's a terrific lineup this year. I'm very, very excited about it.
Great. Well, congratulations. Congratulations for chairing it for over 10 years. And congratulations for putting a program together that sounds just bang on, really. So, Robin Hall, pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you very much, Nigel.
Well, it's been hot as hell this summer, and we finished another hot take on this month's programme. Nigel, anything stand out to you this month?
Yes, I want to draw attention to the Gallup report. Now, they bring it out, state of the nation, state of the workforce every single year. But this time they've tried to do something very different. One is introducing this concept of thriving. And I think that's actually a very useful term. And I reckon we're going to hear much more about organizations where the employees thrive and organizations where they do not thrive and are not just disengaged, but quitting the organization mentally first and then physically second. So that's a really interesting focus. And the fact that they've broken the data out region by region is also significant. And that you maybe would be surprised or wouldn't be surprised to hear that UK is one of the lowest percentage of people who are thriving at work. But pretty much, regardless of whether you're in China or in the US or Europe or anywhere else, the figures are still pretty abysmal. I think it's 16% on average are thriving in the workplace. It goes up to 19, goes down a little bit, but essentially it's a pretty bleak picture, but everybody should read this. You can't be in a people-centered role and not understand what is really going on in the heart of the workplaces. So this is why, my big thing at the moment with L&D is get into the workplace, start to sort out the fundamental cultural issues. Then learning is easy. If you are quietly quitting, how much interest have you got in learning anything new or developing new skills? Not at all. You're quietly quitting. So you've got to fix that before you fix anything else. So it was very good. I also think the series we've got running with Bob Mosher and Stella Collins are excellent, really useful. And we can put those together when they're finished. Now, that's a really interesting, insightful package of resource, which could be used in all sorts of circumstances, not just on LNTV once a month. I don't know if you agree, Kate.
Well, practicing what we preach as well, bite-sized learning, put it all together, longer chunks if you want. So absolutely practicing what we always showcase on Learning Now TV.
Completely true. And what about events? There must be some events coming up, Kate.
Well, thank you for asking, Nigel. There are. So our good friend Elliot Macy has his Learning Festival in New York. I wish I was going to that on the 15th of July. So look forward to the highlights from that. Then we skip across the summer holidays to our friends at the Learning and Performance Institute with Learning Live. That's happening in London on the 13th and 14th of September. 10th and 11th of October is World of Learning in Birmingham at the NEC. I do know that Alicia is happening in Paris on the 17th and 18th of October as well. And the 17th of November sees the Learning Network Connect 2023 event happening in London. So plenty for your diary there.
Plenty. And it's really good to see Elliot Macy learning, not conference, but festival. He's back on the scene in a big way, which is great to see. I'm really looking forward to hearing some feedback from that. So 27th of July, that's when the next program goes out. We're already in summer. It's amazing. Kate, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Take care, look after yourself, and enjoy your new role. Bye-bye. See you soon.
As always, see you soon.